Hi everyone, welcome back to the Zicast. I'm your host Ryan Ziaks, and today I'm joined by journalist Gabriella Boas. Thank you so much for being here, Gabby, and I'm very excited to learn more about you and your experiences. So how about you kick things off by telling us about yourself?
My name is Gabriella Boas, and I'm from Greenwich, Connecticut. So not too far of a trek all the way up here to Hamden. It was a pretty short little move. I started journalism in college, like before I was very into the acting scene. So I think it was a pretty seamless transition because it was just always in front of the camera, and I've always loved, I guess, just being in front of the camera. So journalism was kind of just the next shift.
Yeah. Yeah, they've always translated very well. I've noticed because I've interviewed so many journalists on here, and the ability to present yourself to a camera, to be able to communicate with an audience, those kind of skills transfer over. And I'm curious, kind of in your experiences in journalism here at Quinnipiac University, where you go to school, what really drew you there?
So I am a transfer student, so I did start off kind of in print journalism, which is interesting. I always thought, I love writing, might as well write for magazines or anything like that, which I did have an internship with the Westport magazine, but I realized, print maybe isn't my realm. I think that with broadcast, it feels a lot more hands-on. I'm not someone who likes to be at home or anything. I like to be out in the field running around. So I think that's what drew me into broadcast when I started here at Quinnipiac, because other schools really don't have the same broadcasting programs, at least not the previous institution that I was at. So getting to work with the cameras and just getting to actually be in the field and in the environment of your story kind of just really drew me into the sort of broadcast world.
And can you walk us through some of the experiences you've had in journalism, like you mentioned, working for print? What have you been able to do in other forms?
So I started off working in print. I did a few stories. I did one that was at the embassy in like Madagascar. So it was
wow.
on Zoom, but that one was really cool. I think that's what really made me think, this is the path I want to take. I do want to be a journalist. So that one I got to talk to students at the University of Antananarivo, and that just felt like a really big moment for me because it's stories that wouldn't necessarily be told otherwise. So I think that's what really drew me into storytelling in this sort of format. And then at Quinnipiac, I got to work a lot with the cameras and get like MOS content, which is just man on the street content, which is not something you typically do with print. And it's just a lot of people interaction, which I loved. So that was kind of my big, like, okay, I want to work in camera work. I did my first story in sort of broadcast was this, I think it was an ice cream shop. So I went to Wentworth's here in Hamden. It's only a few minutes away, but I got to interview the owner and customers, and just being in the environment felt right.
And I know you've had like different internships and things like that, and any of that you'd want to take us into?
So right now I'm working at NBC Connecticut, which it's honestly just been the greatest experience ever. I'm so fortunate to be there right now because it's a rotation format. So essentially every few weeks we would switch our roles. So I started off reporting, and then after that I went to producing, and then the digital desk, which is kind of like working with their online articles and like cutting video for YouTube. And then I got to shadow someone who does the social media content, which was cool. And then after that, I went to the assignment desk, which is kind of my main post right now, but I've also been shadowing reporters here and there. And then on Tuesday, I get to shadow an anchor, which is really cool, which I haven't done that yet, so I'm excited.
Yeah, I love that. So you kind of get to see each step of
Yes.
the process. And I'm curious, like rotating all those different roles, did any of those change your perspective on broadcasting at all?
Honestly, I think seeing how it all works collaboratively, my apologies, it really did change my perspective in a lot of ways, because I've always kind of just been in the sort of reporting realm, just writing my own script and making my own package, but seeing what the producers do really opened my eyes. I mean, something that people at home don't know is there is a huge clock. It is the most intimidating thing. And when you're in that control room, you're kind of just watching the clock count down and making sure that your segment stays within the time frame that you have. So watching them have to be in like the anchor's ear and be like, okay, you have 1 more minute, like don't go over. That was definitely a wake-up call for me.
So it's kind of like a little ticking time bomb
Yes.
while they're on the air.
Absolutely.
Outside of that, what's something people don't realize goes into creating a news broadcast like that.
That was definitely the biggest thing I never realized, was that they're literally watching it tick down the time. But another thing is, you kind of don't realize how, I guess, picking the stories of the day goes. We start off our day in a editorial meeting where everyone pitches whatever stories they found for that day, and then they kind of just decide which one they think has the most impact. And one thing I find so interesting is, like a news segment often follows something else that's on the air, especially the night shows. So I've been going now this semester. I intern on night side and day side, which last semester was just day side. So I've been getting to go to those afternoon meetings, which it's like completely different stories because it's at night.
Yeah.
And they have to consider, like, before the show, is it going to be a crime heavy show because it's following Dateline, or is it going to be a sports heavy show because it's following like the playoffs or something? So that is definitely something I've never thought about.
Interesting. So it's kind of like, how else would they differ, the daytime versus the nighttime? And it's interesting kind of how they are kind of piggyback off of what came before.
Yeah, it's kind of just a way to make sure people stick around. I think, unfortunately, people watching the news has been really depleting. So it's just trying to appeal to people and whoever's watching already. So if they're watching for the sports, you want to keep their attention and you want that first story to be about sports. And then maybe they're so interested that they stick around and they hear more of like the news and what's going on.
And also, this is the second time I forgot to shout you out, Presley. Shout out my technical director, Presley Schmitt, for helping me out again. And yeah, I'm also curious too, Gabby, from like even your experiences in the field, what's that like versus what people might imagine?
In the field, it's a very unique experience. It's definitely my favorite thing to do because it's so fast-paced, and you wouldn't imagine that, but you want to get as many interviews as possible. So it's kind of figuring out like what specialists you want to interview, what kind of content on the street you want to get. So that is something that I didn't expect it to be so quick. I was like, oh, well, you kind of set that up earlier, but no, you only have a few hours to do the story. So it's really fast paced. And then a lot of the time people do have to shift their stories if something's not working. Like one of my shadowing experiences, we were following this cow that escaped, and they were looking for this like fluffy cow that escaped. I think it was in Manchester. I'm not 100% sure where in Connecticut it escaped from, but then there was this big crash. So it was like, okay, no more cow. You got to go to this crash. Lo and behold, the crash is like completely gated off by police, so we can't go and film anything. Like it's just all far away, and they're like, well, you could film from here, and it's like, well, you can't see anything from here. So it's a lot of shifting, which you wouldn't expect, and the more you shift, the tighter your time crunch. So that's definitely something like viewers don't know, you have to just make sure it's as clean and seamless as possible, even if you are under that time crunch. And I think that reporters, like at least the ones I've shadowed, do a really good job on that. Like you would never know how quick they did that story.
And you said the crash, I thought like it was gonna be the cow causing mischief, and it was gonna be like,
oh my gosh, imagine.
It all comes twofold. And I'm curious, you mentioned kind of like the pivoting that reporters need to do. Do you have any other instances of that were really like formative for you?
I mean, for pivoting, I've definitely had to pivot a few times. I know that here at school, I'm mostly, I don't know why, but I'm always, every time I'm reporting, something is happening. Something just coincidentally, I'm like, something bad is going to happen if I'm reporting, because that just always happens. Like, I pitched a story about, I think it was like puppies or something, because I wanted a soft story. That week, the U.S. enters a huge conflict with Iran. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm not hanging out with puppies today. I gotta report on the potential war. So that was a huge pivot for me. But also, like, technically wise, there's a lot of pivoting. If you do anything wrong, I know that when I first started out working with cameras and stuff, there was an interview I did that had zero sound. And I recorded it in like the parking lot of Sephora. It was a story about kind of like the Sephora kids epidemic that's happening on TikTok now, where like kids are watching all these videos and putting on all these harmful chemicals on their faces. So it was a really important story to me. So I was really excited to get all that content. But what ended up happening is when I went out, there was no sound. I didn't set up the mic correctly. So I had to find Zoom interviews because I didn't have a car at that point. So I had to get a Zoom interview within like a day to just make sure that I had that voice of like a parent who understands that sort of perspective of the kids that are using those things.
Yeah, and even pivoting when there's an issue on your end too, which happens so much in filmmaking and things like that, and the ability to have that kind of resolve to overcome something like that. And I'm also curious, you mentioned like pitching stories as well. What's that kind of like, and like how do you go about doing that?
Well, working on the assignment desk has definitely helped me out with that a lot, because it's all of it is really just finding pitches all day for the most part, besides contacting sources and everything. But going about pitching stories, I think it's all about impact. Like you want to consider your audience. Like every show is different. So there's the daytime shows where it's like, okay, they're watching after work, or they're watching with their families, or like it's kind of just all about who is watching and what they're going to stick around for, that you have to consider. And that's something I've definitely noticed in what reporters and producers pitch at the meetings that I get to go to. For myself, I also just really, anytime I pitch anything, it's all about impact and what like communities are going to feel that story the most. I think that that's like the key part about journalism, is the stories aren't about you or even like necessarily who you're talking to, but it's about who's watching and how it's going to make them feel.
So really catering to an audience that way. Is that what you gravitate towards? Because you mentioned like want to do the puppy, so like a kicker, like a lighter story, and then the Sephora, so like appealing to people in like in our age range. Is that the kind of stories you gravitate towards?
Everything I think about when deciding which story I'm going to do is definitely just all about impact. I like to cover those more important stories and those lighter stories as well, just because I work on so many heavy things and I'm like, okay, I want to find some fun ones. So it's definitely a process. You want to think about I guess also you have to make sure it's from a non-biased standpoint.
Yes.
So as much as you do want to talk about certain things, you want to make sure you're getting all aspects of that story. For example, for the story that I did about the war, I wanted to make sure that I found people who either supported the conflict, people who were against it, and kind of just reactions in general. But sometimes that doesn't happen. I couldn't get any supporting voices here on campus. So what I ended up doing is I had to pivot the story and kind of just make it about student reactions rather than, okay, this is what's happening and this is what this person thinks that's for it, and this is what this person thinks that's against it. I had to pivot and be like, okay, this is how students feel right now, but this is what's going on, and this is just the reaction.
Yeah, and what's it like managing the difficulties of that? Because naturally, kind of like what you said, just reporting on something can make it seem like you're leaning a certain way. Like, for example, somebody makes a war movie, there's someone that's going to think that's cool. So like, what's it kind of like trying to kind of lean away from just making sure it's partial?
It's definitely difficult sometimes, just because I think that being partial is definitely objective. I feel that especially in today's environment, no matter what you say, someone's going to say, oh, that's biased, even if it's not. So it's definitely just taking things with a grain of salt and just making sure that you're being as objective as possible. So I don't know, it's hard. A lot of what I do is I just make sure I have a lot of eyes on it, because again, like I was saying, I think I said objective, but I meant subjective, biases, a lot of it is subjective, and a lot of people that are watching are going to be like, well, that could mean that she's on this side, or that could mean that she's on that side. So it's definitely just making sure that script is really tight, and kind of just what I try to do is I focus on who I interview and kind of just making sure I credit their opinions and never my own.
Yeah.
So that's kind of just my process on it, and then just making sure that a lot of people look it over.
And that kind of feedback is so helpful too, regardless of anything you're making. And I know you mentioned the assignment desk. Let me take you back to that a little bit, because I know that's kind of like the nerve center of the newsroom, if that makes sense. What did you learn there that you feel like you couldn't learn anywhere else?
I think really the assignment desk is so overlooked. It's something a lot of people don't even think about when they think about watching the news. It really is the heart of the newsroom, because all the pitches you get, they come from there, because it's all day you're looking through emails, you're looking through other websites, you're looking through even Facebook groups to see what people are upset about in the community. That's a lot of what I do on the desk, is kind of just digging through social media and seeing like, okay, people are really talking about this and they feel really strongly about this. So maybe that's something we want to talk about. So it really is just the heart of the newsroom, in the sense that they're always paying attention and they've got eyes everywhere. I know that we have like the police radio station there that we're always listening to. And we contact sources a lot as well. So a lot of it, when there is breaking news, is very fast. A few weeks ago, I had an experience where there was a threat to one of the malls in Connecticut. So we had to call people. I think it was 10 minutes of just the most stressful and fast-paced, just contacting people nonstop. I had to call the mall security, had to call the police, had to call the mall representative, and it was just so quick. But you have to make sure that you have all of the sources before you send someone out there and you send them to the wrong spot, because you always want to be respectful and everything. And in that instance, they were sending all media to the Olive Garden instead of the actual mall, so you want to just be mindful of kind of keeping your distance from the police and everything as well, to kind of let everyone do what they're doing.
Yeah, and naturally, like looking through all these different forums and all these different places to find news, how do you determine what's newsworthy and trustworthy and what's not?
It really is just all about impact for me, I think. I think when I'm looking through pitches, we get a lot of emails from different people kind of trying to get us to tell their stories. And it's unfortunate that not every story can be told, but there is a time crunch in news. And it really is, if it's timely and impactful. So I think that that's the most important. And then with the trustworthy aspect, you want to make sure you're kind of checking a lot of different sources and making sure, okay, like, are you telling me this because you feel a certain way, or are you telling me this because it is affecting a lot of people? Yeah. So that's definitely something that goes into consideration.
And it's very interesting nowadays with social media playing into a component of news, because obviously before social media, it was kind of like a lot of the man in the street stuff, like you mentioned. So kind of working across these different mediums like print, broadcast, something like the assignment desk, how has that changed your perspective on just telling the news?
It's so different, I think that social media has kind of created this sort of spiral where people expect news so quickly, but with social media, like, you have to take everything you're consuming on there with a grain of salt, because it is so fast that it turns out a lot of it isn't true, you know? That's the unfortunate part about social media. So I think that working in broadcast, the most important thing is you don't have to be first, you just have to be right. So that's something that I've really paid attention to and kind of just made sure is like the heart of what I'm doing. It doesn't matter how quick you are, just as long as you're the most accurate. And then you kind of also have to learn to navigate those mediums too. Like, as an aspiring reporter, I have to be on social media and I have to have a presence, which normally, like, I'm a very off the grid person. I don't like posting, but now I've started posting and I've kind of learned to enjoy it. And then, print is also so different, because I think with print you have more time as well to kind of really delve into something, whereas a broadcast news package is only about 2 minutes, whereas an article you have a lot more space to talk about everything. And then in a news package, you're always considering like the inverted pyramid with writing like an essay, but with news, it's just a pyramid. You want the most important thing at the top, and then you kind of delve into the details later on. And you have more room to do that in print, but in broadcast, you kind of have to work, okay, most important detail, most important detail, most important detail. Like, it is still, I guess, getting into the nitty gritty, like deeper into the story, but you want to make sure that everything is hard hitting because you're on such limited time.
Yeah. Any of those formats you're more partial to, that you gravitate towards more?
I'm just such a broadcast person, which is crazy because I used to be such a print person. I think that just because it's so visual as well, with print you do get to read more about the story and everything because there is more, I guess, space. But with broadcast, you kind of get all the elements. You get that sound, you get those visuals, and it just feels a lot more interactive. And I feel like you connect with the audience a lot more because they see you and they hear you and they see where you are and the people that it's affecting. So I think for me, broadcast is kind of where my heart's at.
Yeah, it's kind of like a book versus a movie.
Yes.
Book, there's more room to explore a story. movie, it's a lot more concise because you want to pace it well, keep the audience engaged. So it really just boils down to kind of naturally how you want to tell the story and how you want it to come across to the audience. And kind of through all of these experiences you've had, I'm curious if there's a story that you've worked on that's really stood out to you and that is really meaningful that you'd want to reflect on.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stories I've done have been hard news. So a lot of it is like kind of, I guess, more difficult things to look at in a sense sometimes. I know that when I was on the producing rotation at NBC Connecticut is when the whole situation with the body that was found in New Britain was happening. And that definitely changed me a lot as a person because even just shadowing, I think that one thing that's really important to consider as a reporter is you kind of have to be okay with learning to deal with those harder things. After that story, I went in my car and cried because it was so sad. Like they essentially found this body of a little girl who had been dead for over a year and was killed by her family. And that was a really difficult thing to kind of watch, but seeing how the professionals handled it really changed my perspective on everything because it's about respect and it's about also just making sure that people know what's going on and then resources to kind of help. So I think that was probably the most impactful story I've ever witnessed and helped work on. On my own stuff here on campus, I think that Sephora Kids thing was really important to me. I love kids. Like, I love kids. So I always think about, like, families for my stories a lot of the time, especially interning at local news. So that one was really important to me because, you know, social media, like I was saying, kind of derails a lot of things. And it's such a big part of the news world, but it's also such a big part of society in general. And I've always paid attention to how it impacts people, but watching kids kind of go onto those platforms and fall into consumer sort of, I guess, traps is something that's really been going on. So it's a lot of just trying to shed light on things that maybe people aren't paying attention to. So that story was kind of focusing on like trying to spread awareness to kids' activity online and how companies are sort of profiting off of marketing skincare and makeup to these little girls and kind of like projecting insecurities onto them, trying to make money off of them, but also the sort of dangerous aspect where it's harmful chemicals that they're putting on their face. So that was a really important story for me as well.
Kind of building on that, I know you've touched on it so far. What kind of responsibilities do you feel journalists have today with news being so polarizing, with social media? Like, for example, you mentioned it before, like I mean, a lot of my news I get on social media will be like a meme that's not like, I'll see people sending it to me as if it was true, and I'm like, this is not true. So I'm curious, kind of what responsibilities do you feel like journalists have to kind of break through that noise?
I think now journalists definitely have a much bigger responsibility just because, you know, people are gravitating towards social media for their news rather than turning on their TV. And you kind of have to learn to kind of navigate all mediums. I've been practicing with TikTok a lot just to make sure that, you know, when I'm actually, you know, a full-time reporter, I know what I'm doing. So that's kind of just been my journey on social media so far. But I think a lot of what journalists are doing nowadays that I've witnessed with my shadowing experience is just making sure that they're kind of grabbing people's attention within that first second. And it's those attention-grabbing things that make people stay. So it's a little less like a traditional sort of newscast or package. It's more like almost YouTube style, which I think is interesting. You know, it's very unique and it's really cool to kind of see that process, but just making sure it's all factual and newsworthy while also making sure it kind of has that entertainment value, which is a little weird because like some of it is such dark and heavy stuff. So you have to make sure you're not kind of, you want to maintain a balance, you know, you want to keep that entertainment sort of style of keeping people watching without being disrespectful to what you're talking about.
Because that's actually how I came across your work, is through your news account. So it's kind of interesting, kind of blending something like content creation, which is a newer way of interacting with people, with news. How have you been able to do that?
So what I've been doing is a lot of what I do on social media has kind of just been day in the life so that people can see the behind the scenes of it. There's unfortunately not a lot I can show just because, of course, like I'm with a company and everything, so I want to be respectful of their policies. And also, I'm telling these stories, so I'm like, well, I want you to watch the story. So if you see what I'm doing behind the scenes, maybe that'll make you watch the story. But it's been a really fun ride. I think it makes even doing the story more fun because you kind of get to film that process and have fun with. I pick little songs and I did a voiceover one once, but I realized I like the song ones more. They're more fun to do because then I pick out like which one kind of fits the vibe the most. But yeah, I've honestly been really loving social media. I think that it's a great way to get yourself seen and increase that sort of viewership. And then I think it also builds trust with your audience, because people feel like they know you when they see you a lot. So especially with this kind of behind the scenes stuff, especially since I'm not a full-time reporter at a station right now, and I can film all these behind the scenes, I want, when I do get to that point, people to see kind of my process and know, like, you can trust me. This is what I'm doing. You can see every step of the way. This might not be what I'm filming now, but you can go back and see, like, okay, this is how she does things. So, I don't know. It's kind of just not just increasing viewership, but also increasing that trust and making people feel like they know me in a sense.
Because it kind of, like, breaks any barrier. Yes. Like, you're not some, like, movie star that's in a different world than them, that you're very much person just like them, and when they see you on TV or wherever, that, like you said, that they can trust you. And to kind of continue learning more about you, how about I ask you some fun, get to know yous? How about you tell us some things people might not know about you, like fun facts?
Fun facts. Well, I'm a very music person. My favorite part about going to work, my drive is very long. So I have like a huge playlist and I just like sing along in my car the entire time. And then I get to work and I'm like, playlist is done. But I'm a huge music person, which is not something people typically know because I'm mostly doing all the camera stuff. But I have my little guitar in my dorm, and I did a lot of singing growing up. Like I mentioned before, I was big in the theater and acting realm before I got into news. So I don't know. It's kind of just, that's been my sort of fun hobby, I guess. But I think when I went to college, I was like, okay, what's like a more feasible career than like maybe acting or theater? So it's kind of bringing in all those entertainment aspects into my work too, which is fun.
Yeah, which would, of course, helps more people to kind of interact with your work. What music do you like to play?
I've been listening to a lot of pop music. I used to be... I'm a big theater kid. I will admit it. Maybe that's an embarrassing thing to admit to some people, but I used to be really heavy on the show tunes. But I know it's interesting. But lately, I've been gravitating towards a lot of like the more popular like pop girlies, which has been really fun. And I think it's just also like happy, fun music on the way to work because I used to listen to really sad things. Like I'm a huge Noah Kahn fan, but I can't listen to that on the way to work because then I get there and I'm like, I'm so sad. I wonder why. It's like, well, what were you listening to? So that's a big aspect of it too. Another thing that people might not know about me that is really funny because I've been seeing it kind of go into my work a lot is I'm a big animal person. I love animals for some weird reason. I don't know why. But I try to pitch a lot of animal stories just so that I can hang out with them. So I did a story recently, kind of on my own, just for my reporter reel, that I went to a farm and kind of did a segment on like this baby goat social. It was the first one of the year, and it was at the farm that started baby goat yoga, which is like a huge trend now. So I got to film a stand-up holding a baby goat, which was probably one of my favorite things that I've done, but it's kind of just like a silly little anecdote.
Some dreams do come true.
Maybe the dream is hanging out with baby goats sometimes.
So what is goat yoga?
So goat yoga, you basically do yoga, but these baby goats are all around you. So sometimes they like climb on your back, or they're like, if you're in like a plank or something, they'll come underneath you. It's really funny. But the baby goat social was you kind of go in and I sat on the outside just watching people interact with them, but they just hold the goats and like bottle feed them and stuff, which was adorable. But it really like is interesting to see because something even so silly as that was like therapy for all the people that were there. It was just kind of a way to de-stress. So
it's kind of like like how dogs are like calming for
Yes.
people, is that kind of interaction. And I'm also curious, so you love animals. What's one thing you love and one thing you strongly dislike in general?
I'm a bit of a hater. I'm gonna admit it. Like you're saying things you strongly dislike. I'm like, oh. But I am a huge coffee person. I think it's what keeps me alive. I run on like 2 shots of espresso every day, which is a little concerning. I've been leaning towards 3, which is not good. I've been trying to cut back a little bit, but I would say the thing I hate the most in the world is probably decaf.
So, and the thing you love the most?
Probably coffee.
Oh,
It really, I think my schedule is just so busy, and I do like, I have class and then I go to work and I get home at 10 p.m., you know? So I go to bed and I'm like, okay, I'm going to have my coffee in the morning and it's going to power me through until 10 p.m. when I'm back in my bed. So it's just a motivating factor at this point.
I know what you mean. Like I love my energy drinks, so I very much understand needing caffeine to make it through
Sort of
things.
function.
Exactly, especially on those early mornings, like you said, long commute, and sometimes no con. You need a bit more than that, to keep it going. And I'm curious, kind of just moving forward, like what are some of your hopes and dreams personally or professionally?
Professionally, I hope to go into reporting as soon as I can after graduation. I am doing the cans, or some people call it cons. I'm not sure.
yeah.
Yes. So I'm doing the...
with Presley.
Yes.
And
I'm doing...
myself, I did last year.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It looks so much fun. So I'm really excited. I've never left the country before, so I'm excited to go to France and kind of explore that and then do my little social media there before going into wherever my next step is. I only recently started applying, like, by recently I mean like two weeks ago, 1 week ago, so I haven't heard back, so I'm not really sure yet what exactly I'm doing, but it's it's a learning curve. I'm excited to see where I go, and I do have high hopes. I think I have like a realistic sort of outlook on it where I do really want to start reporting, and if that means moving to some place with a smaller market, then I'm willing to do it.
Yeah, and the journeys, you never know where it'll take you, especially in the communications field, where it'll take you some interesting places, but places where you learn more about yourself. And you kind of mentioned being into theater, but how about I ask you about movies? What are some of your favorite movies?
My favorite movie, like, ever is definitely Mamma Mia. And 1 and 2, because I can't pick which one's better. I know a lot of people hate on the sequel, but I like both. Because they're both so fun. I think finding those sort of, like, go-lucky and happy movies is just such a good way to kind of unwind and de-stress, especially in a job as stressful as this one, where you're kind of just looking at depressing things all day.
It's like a kicker.
Exactly. So I like that one, especially people hate watching movies with me because I'm a huge movie musical kind of person. So, and I will sing along, just to annoy people. So
Yeah. And overall, Gabby, this was a really fun episode of this show. So thank you so much for coming on today. I'm curious if you have any motivational words or plugs or anything you'd like to leave the audience with.
I think my biggest word of encouragement is just everything happens for a reason. I think definitely in my own career, I've had a lot of ups and downs, and just learning that pivoting is part of it. And it's not always a bad thing. It might feel like a bad thing in the moment, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. No matter how much something might hurt or not feel like what you want in that moment, everything happens for a reason, whether it be negative or positive, and you're always going to end up where you're supposed to be, no matter how long it takes.
Awesome. And I really appreciate you coming on the show, sharing your insights, and really sharing just how interesting just modern journalism is through all these different formats, and how if you can take advantage of them and utilize them to the best of their abilities, you can interact with people in different ways. So thank you so much for sharing that and for your time today.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And as always, this is Ryan Ziaks with the Zicast, where everyone has a story. Signing off. Thank you so much for listening.